Welcome to Fluent Verse, where words meet power, and every story fuels your fire. Today's story is the struggle of a bodybuilder, the journey of one man, Leo, who fought against pain, doubt, and failure to rise beyond limits. This isn't just about muscle, it's about mindset. It's about what happens when you refuse to quit, even when life hits harder than the weights. Let's begin. Part 1: The Spark. Leo had always been the kind of person who felt invisible in a crowd. He wasn't weak, not really, but he wasn't strong either. He was somewhere in between, a shadow drifting through the noise of the world. He walked through life quietly, shoulders slouched, eyes down, as though he was afraid to take up too much space. Growing up, he was never the fastest, never the smartest, never the one people pointed to with admiration. He was ordinary, painfully, frustratingly ordinary, and deep inside, that ordinariness gnawed at him like a quiet hunger he couldn't satisfy. He remembered the first time he had really noticed strength. It wasn't in a movie or a magazine cover or on a stage. It was in real life on an ordinary summer afternoon when he was 16. He had gone with his father to help move furniture for a neighbor. The man, a retired soldier, had a body that seemed carved from stone. His arms flexed as he lifted heavy wooden boxes that Leo could barely budge. There was no arrogance in his movements, no showing off, just calm control, quiet power. When he smiled, it wasn't pride, it was peace. Something about that moment planted a seed inside Leo. He didn't say anything, not even to himself, but that night when he looked at his reflection, he lingered. He touched his thin arm and wondered what it would feel like to be strong, truly strong, not just physically but in spirit, to stand tall and feel unshakable. That night, as the ceiling fan whispered above him, Leo made a silent promise. One day he would find that strength. But dreams are easy when they're still distant. The real test begins when you take the first step. Leo's first steps were clumsy. He saved up money from odd jobs, washing cars, delivering newspapers, helping at a local store, to buy a rusty set of dumbbells. They weren't much. One handle was slightly bent, and the plates rattled when he lifted them. But to Leo they were sacred. Every morning before dawn, he'd sneak out into the small backyard and train. The cold bit at his skin, but he didn't mind. It was his secret ritual. While others slept, he struggled, sweat dripping into the soil beneath him. First, nothing happened. Weeks passed, and he saw no change. His arms were still thin, his chest still flat. His mother would smile kindly at him during breakfast and ask, "Still exercising, Leo?" He'd nod, but inside doubt whispered, "Maybe I'm not meant for this." Then one morning he noticed it, barely visible but real. A small curve, a hint of muscle under his skin. It wasn't much, but to Leo, it was proof that effort mattered. That his dream wasn't foolish. That maybe, just maybe, he could become someone stronger than his fears. As the months passed, training became his escape. He stopped caring about the opinions of others. While friends spent their weekends partying or scrolling through endless screens, Leo chased a feeling. The burn in his muscles, the thudding rhythm of his heartbeat, the quiet satisfaction of finishing one more rep when his mind screamed to stop. He wasn't training for applause. He was training for the version of himself he wanted to meet one day. But the world rarely understands the quiet dreamers. People began to notice his obsession and mock it. "Why are you wasting time with those weights?" a classmate once sneered. "You think you'll be some kind of superhero?" Even his father, though not unkind, couldn't see the point. "Leo, it's good to stay fit, but you have to focus on real goals, a job, a career. Muscles won't feed you." Leo never argued. He just smiled and said, "I know, Dad," then went back to his training. By the time he was 18, Leo's body had changed. He was no longer invisible. His shoulders were broader, his back straighter. But something deeper had changed too, his eyes. There was focus there now, a quiet determination that made people pause when they spoke to him. He had learned that strength wasn't loud. It was patient. It was the voice inside that said, "One more," when everything hurt. When he moved to the city for college, Leo found his first real gym, a dimly lit, old-school place that smelled of iron and sweat. The walls were covered with faded posters of legends from the past, men who had built themselves from nothing, who had turned pain into power. The first time he stepped inside, he felt out of place. The others were huge, seasoned lifters who spoke in a language of reps and macros. But instead of fear, Leo felt excitement. He had found his temple. His first week was brutal. The weights felt heavier than they looked. His hands blistered, his muscles screamed, and there were nights he could barely lift his arms to eat. But every ache was a message, proof that he was changing. The coach, an old man named Victor, watched him silently for a while. Then one day, as Leo struggled with a barbell, Victor walked over. "You've got heart," he said. "But heart isn't enough. You need discipline. Show up every day no matter how you feel. The body listens to consistency, not emotion." Those words stuck with Leo like fire etched into stone. From that day he made a promise. No excuses. Rain, exhaustion, stress. Nothing would stop him from showing up. And he didn't. Day after day he trained. His calluses thickened, his body hardened, his mind sharpened. There were days when he felt unstoppable, when every lift felt smooth, when he caught glimpses of what he could become. But there were also days when he questioned everything, when progress stalled, when pain lingered, when the mirror showed only flaws. On those days, Leo learned his most valuable lesson. Motivation fades, but discipline remains. Victor began to notice his growth, not just the muscle but the mindset. One evening, as the gym emptied and Leo stayed behind to finish his workout, Victor approached him again. "Why do you do this?" he asked. "You're not competing. You don't get paid for it. What drives you?" Leo paused, staring at the reflection of his sweat-covered face in the mirror. "Because when I train, I feel alive," he said quietly. "Every rep teaches me who I am. The pain reminds me that I'm not weak anymore." Victor smiled, a rare expression from the old man. "Good answer," he said. "Most people chase strength to impress others. The real ones chase it to find themselves." That night, Leo walked home under the dim glow of the streetlights, muscles aching, soul on fire. He thought about everything, his past, his doubts, his future. And for the first time he felt a deep certainty. He didn't know where this path would lead, but he knew it was his. He began keeping a notebook, not of numbers or routines, but of thoughts. On its first page he wrote, "Strength is not built in the gym. It's built in the moments you want to quit and don't." The notebook became his silent companion, his record of growth. On bad days, he'd write about his frustration. On good days, he'd write about gratitude. Over time, he realized that bodybuilding was never just about building muscle. It was about building resilience, self-respect, and faith in one's own effort. Then came the turning point, a local competition. It wasn't big, just a small event at the gym. Victor pushed him to enter. "It's time you test yourself," he said. Leo hesitated. He didn't feel ready. "I'm not big enough," he said. "Not good enough." Victor chuckled. "No one ever feels ready. That's why they stay the same." So Leo agreed. The weeks leading up to the competition were brutal. He pushed harder than ever, Early mornings, late nights, strict diet, endless cardio. He felt his body transform again, not just in size but in precision. Every muscle became a story of sacrifice. Every moment of doubt became a rep completed. When the day finally arrived, Leo stood backstage, trembling. The bright lights, the noise, the crowd. It was overwhelming. He had never been on a stage before. But as he looked at the other competitors, men bigger and more experienced, something inside him shifted. He realized that he wasn't there to beat anyone else. He was there to face himself. When his turn came, he walked on stage, took a deep breath and posed. For a moment the world faded. There was no fear, no comparison. Just the echo of his own heartbeat and the silent memory of every morning he had fought to become better. He didn't win that day. He didn't even place in the top 3. But as he left the stage, he felt victorious. Because he had done what once seemed impossible. He had stepped into the light and faced his fear. That night, as he sat alone in his small room, the medal-less neck didn't bother him. He knew something that no prize could capture. He had changed. The boy who once hid in the shadows had become a man unafraid to be seen. And as he drifted to sleep, one thought echoed through his mind. This is just the beginning. Part 2. The struggle. The weeks after Leo's first competition were strangely quiet. The noise and excitement had faded, leaving only the familiar rhythm of the gym. The clank of iron, the hum of treadmills, the faint music in the background. He returned to training like always, but something inside him had shifted. The fire that once burned so brightly now flickered uncertainly. For the first time in years, Leo didn't know what he was chasing. He had given everything to that first competition. Every ounce of effort, every drop of energy, every dream. But standing on that stage and walking away without a trophy had left a crack in his confidence. It wasn't about pride, it was about identity. For so long, he had tied his worth to progress, to the idea that hard work would always bring reward. But now he realized life didn't follow fair equations. Effort didn't always equal victory. Sometimes you gave your best and still came up short. Victor noticed the change. The coach didn't say much at first, but he could read Leo's body language. The slight hesitation before sets, the lack of spark in his eyes. One evening, as Leo sat on the bench between sets, Victor approached and said, "You're training, but your heart isn't here. What's wrong?" Leo shrugged, wiping sweat from his face. "I don't know, coach. I thought I'd feel different after that competition. Like it would prove something. But it didn't. It just made me realize how far I still have to go." Victor nodded slowly. "You thought the stage would give you validation. But real strength isn't built under lights. It's built in the dark when no one's watching. You already proved something, Leo. You proved you can show up. Most people never even start." Leo tried to take the words in, but they didn't land right away. That night, he went home and stared at his reflection again. The same reflection he had watched years ago when he first began this journey. His body was stronger now, yes, but his eyes looked tired. He realized that physical transformation was only half the journey. The harder battle was the one inside. Over the following months, Leo kept training, but his progress slowed. His lifts plateaued and worse, he started feeling pain. A sharp ache in his right shoulder that refused to go away. He tried to ignore it at first, thinking it was just fatigue. But one day, during an intense session of bench presses, the pain flared so violently that he dropped the barbell halfway through the lift. The clang echoed across the gym. He sat up, clutching his shoulder, his breath ragged. Victor rushed over. "That's it. You're done for today." The next morning, Leo went to a sports doctor. The verdict hit hard. a partial rotator cuff tear. You need to rest, the doctor said. No upper body training for at least 6 weeks. If you push through, you could make it worse. Maybe even permanent. For Leo, those words were a prison sentence. 6 weeks without training felt like a lifetime. But he followed the advice. Reluctantly at first, then with resignation. The first few days were unbearable. His routine, his identity, his sense of purpose. All of it was built around movement, discipline, pain. Without it, he felt lost. He tried to stay productive, focusing on work, reading, writing in his notebook. But the gym called to him like a ghost. Every time he walked past it, he felt like he was betraying himself. He missed the burn, the sweat, the rhythm of effort. He missed the feeling of progress. But slowly, something unexpected began to happen. Deprived of his usual outlet, Leo was forced to face himself. Really face himself. He began to realize how much of his self-worth had been tied to physical progress. For years, he had used the iron as therapy, as escape. But now, with no gym to run to, he had to deal with the silence inside. He started journaling more deeply, not about training but about life. About fear, insecurity, dreams, loneliness. He wrote about how the pursuit of strength had made him both proud and fragile. He wrote about the pressure to be perfect, about the fear of failure, about how even discipline could become a cage. One night, he wrote a line that would stay with him forever. The body breaks to teach the mind endurance. 6 weeks turned into 2 months. His shoulder healed slowly, but his spirit grew stronger. When he finally returned to the gym, it wasn't with the same desperate hunger as before. It was with gratitude. Gratitude for movement, for pain, for the privilege of being able to try again. But the world, as always, had more tests waiting. A few months later, Victor announced that he was retiring. His health had begun to decline, and he needed to step back. Leo was devastated. Victor wasn't just a coach. He was a mentor, a guide, a father figure. The thought of training without him felt like walking without direction. On Victor's last day at the gym, Leo helped him pack up his things. "You'll be fine," Victor said, smiling faintly. "You've learned everything you need." "No," Leo said quietly. "You taught me how to lift, but not how to lead myself." Victor chuckled. "Then this is the lesson you needed most." When he left, the gym felt emptier than ever. The atmosphere was different, the energy strange. Some of the old lifters drifted away, replaced by younger, louder faces who were there for selfies and attention. Leo kept his head down and focused, but it was harder now. He missed the simplicity of those earlier years, when all that mattered was the weight and the will. He tried to fill the void by pushing himself harder, setting new goals, even considering national competitions. But the deeper he went, the more isolated he felt. The bodybuilding world, he realized, could be a dark place, full of comparison, insecurity, and quiet suffering. Behind every smile was exhaustion. Behind every perfect physique was pain. There were moments when Leo wanted to quit, to walk away and live a normal life, one without the constant pressure to be more, to do more. But then he'd remember that boy who once stared into a mirror, wishing to be strong. He couldn't abandon him, so he endured. He started training alone, often late at night when the gym was nearly empty. There was something sacred about those hours, the solitude, the silence, the sound of his breath echoing against the walls. He trained not to impress anyone, not even to compete. He trained to stay alive, to keep that fire inside from dying. But life, as it often does, had another blow waiting. One night Leo received a phone call. It was about his mother. She had fallen ill. A sudden condition that required surgery. Leo dropped everything and rushed home. The next few weeks were a blur of hospital corridors, sleepless nights, and quiet prayers. He sat by her bedside, holding her hand, realizing how small and fragile even the strongest people could be. The gym didn't matter then. The competitions, the training, the pain, it all felt distant. What mattered was love, presence, and gratitude. He watched his mother fight, and in her quiet resilience, he saw a reflection of his own journey. When she finally recovered, Leo returned to the city, changed once again. His muscles had softened a little. His endurance had dipped, but his heart had grown. He no longer chased perfection, he chased purpose. He began training again, slowly, intentionally, not to escape life but to celebrate it. And then, almost as if fate wanted to reward his persistence, an opportunity came. A major fitness organization announced an open invitation for new athletes to compete in an international event. Not for fame, but for the spirit of transformation. It wasn't about who was the biggest or strongest. It was about who could tell a story through their struggle. Victor, though retired, called Leo when he heard. "This one's for you," he said. "This is what all of this has been leading to." Leo hesitated at first. He was older now, more experienced, but also more cautious. The thought of competing again stirred memories. The anxiety, the exhaustion, the pressure. But then he remembered that first promise, the one he made to himself as a teenager. "One day I will find strength." So he said yes. The preparation began. It was different this time. Quieter, wiser, deeper. Leo didn't chase numbers or aesthetics. He chased balance. He trained hard, but he also rested. He fueled his body with care, not punishment. He spoke kindly to himself. He learned to appreciate the process rather than obsess over the result. Still, the journey wasn't easy. Old injuries resurfaced. Doubts whispered. Friends drifted away. There were nights when he stared at the ceiling, wondering if he was still chasing an illusion. But every morning, he woke up and chose to try again. Because that's what strength was. Not perfection, not dominance, but endurance. And as the competition day drew near, Leo felt something he hadn't felt in years: peace. Not excitement, not fear, just peace. Because for the first time, he wasn't trying to prove anything to anyone, not even to himself. He was simply honoring the journey. The night before the event, he sat with his notebook one last time. The pages were worn, filled with sweat stains and old ink. On the last page he wrote, "Maybe the goal was never to become strong. Maybe it was to learn that I already was." He closed the book, took a deep breath and smiled. Part 3: The Rise. Morning came quietly. The air was cool, the sky painted in soft gold. Leo woke before dawn as he always did. But this morning was different. It wasn't just another training day, it was the day. The culmination of years of sweat, failure, pain, and rebirth. The international fitness event he had prepared for was finally here. As he looked in the mirror, he didn't see perfection. He saw truth. The scars, the lines, the muscle, each told a story. A story not of glory, but of endurance. He moved through his morning routine calmly. A light breakfast, quiet stretching, measured breathing. There was no rush. Every movement was deliberate, almost meditative. His nerves were there, but they didn't control him. He had learned, through all the chaos, that fear was just excitement misunderstood. At the venue, the atmosphere buzzed with energy. Competitors from different countries filled the backstage area, each carrying their own story. Some with sponsorships, others with desperation, all united by the same dream. Leo felt small among them, but not lesser. He wasn't here to be the biggest, He was here to be real. As the hours passed and his turn drew closer, Leo found a quiet corner, closed his eyes and reflected. He thought about the boy lifting rusty dumbbells in the backyard, about Victor's teachings, about his mother's strength. He thought about every moment he'd wanted to quit and didn't. Each memory became a heartbeat, each heartbeat a reminder. He had already won long before stepping on that stage. When his name was called, he stepped into the light. The stage was enormous, the crowd vast, but for Leo, it all melted away. The lights blinded him, yet he saw more clearly than ever before. The judges watched, the audience whispered, but Leo only heard his breath, steady, powerful, alive. He moved through his routine slowly, deliberately. Every pose, every motion carried emotion. It wasn't about showing muscle. It was about showing the journey. He remembered the pain of injury, the loneliness of recovery, the loss of his mentor, the tears beside his mother's hospital bed. And somehow, all of that found expression in the strength of his movements. His body spoke a language words could never capture. When it ended, there was silence, then applause. It wasn't thunderous or wild. It was respectful, genuine. Leo bowed his head, smiling faintly. He didn't need validation. He had given everything and that was enough. Backstage, the other competitors congratulated him. Some had seen his quiet focus throughout the event and admired it. One young athlete approached him and said, "You make it look peaceful out there. How do you do that?" Leo smiled and replied softly, "Because I stopped fighting the pain. I started listening to it." Hours later, the results were announced. Leo's name came second. A lesser version of himself from years ago might have felt disappointment, but now, he only felt gratitude. He clapped for the winner, shook hands with the judges, and walked off the stage with the calm of a man who had already found what he was looking for. Outside, the night air was cool again, just as it had been on the morning he began his journey years ago. He stood beneath the streetlights, the distant hum of the city in his ears, and for the first time truly breathed. There was no tension, no goal, no unfinished task. Just peace. As he walked away from the venue, a voice called out behind him. It was Victor. The old man stood there, a cane in hand but a spark in his eyes. Leo was stunned. "Coach, you came." Victor smiled. "You think I'd miss it? I've watched a lot of people chase strength, but I've never seen anyone become it like you." Leo felt emotion rise in his throat. "I didn't win," he said quietly. Victor stepped closer and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Didn't you? You walked through hell and came back standing. That's what winning looks like." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The wind rustled through the nearby trees, carrying the faint sounds of celebration from the arena. Leo looked at his mentor and said, "You were right. The body listens to consistency, not emotion. But the soul, it listens to truth." Victor chuckled. "Looks like the student became the teacher." They parted with an embrace, and Leo walked home under the stars. That night, he sat down with his old notebook, now worn to the point of falling apart. He turned through the pages, reading his own handwriting, words written in frustration, in pain, in hope. He smiled at the innocence of his younger self, at the endless hunger that had driven him this far. On the final blank page, he wrote slowly, deliberately, "Strength is not the absence of weakness. It's the courage to move forward despite it. I began by trying to build a body. I ended up building a soul." He closed the notebook for the last time and placed it on the table beside his bed. The next morning he woke early again, not because of discipline but because of love. He went for a run before dawn, the world still quiet, the air fresh. He ran not to burn calories or prove worth, but to feel alive, to feel connected. Every breath reminded him that the journey never truly ends. It only changes form. Months passed. Leo continued to train, to coach others, to share what he had learned. He started mentoring young athletes at the same old gym where he had once been the shy beginner. They admired his physique, of course, but what truly drew them in was his presence. Calm, grounded, sincere. He taught them not just how to lift weights, but how to lift themselves when life felt heavy. He often told them, "Anyone can be strong when things go right. Real power is staying kind, disciplined, and patient when everything falls apart." One evening, after a long day of training others, Leo locked up the gym and sat alone for a moment. The light from the street outside spilled across the floor, illuminating the rows of dumbbells, silent witnesses to countless dreams and struggles. He remembered the first rusty weights he had lifted as a boy, the first drop of sweat that had fallen onto the dirt behind his house. In that moment, everything came full circle. He smiled to himself, whispering into the quiet, "You did it, kid. You kept your promise." Outside, the sky was painted in shades of purple and blue as the sun dipped below the horizon. Leo walked home slowly, the world around him peaceful. He knew there would still be challenges, injuries, setbacks, aging, but none of it scared him anymore, because he understood now that the true strength he had built could never fade. It wasn't in his muscles. It was in his mind, in his heart, in the quiet fire that would keep burning long after the spotlight faded. Years later, people would remember Leo not just as a bodybuilder, but as a man who turned struggle into art. His students would tell stories about the calm giant who taught them that pain could be beautiful if you learned to grow from it. Some would go on to win championships. Others would simply live stronger, kinder lives. And all of them would carry a piece of his philosophy, that success isn't measured by trophies, but by transformation. One evening, long after his competitive days were over, Leo returned to the stage. Not to compete, but to speak. The auditorium was filled with young athletes, each of them searching for inspiration. When he took the microphone, the crowd fell silent. He looked out over the faces and said, "I used to think bodybuilding was about the body. But it's about life. Every rep is a challenge, every failure a lesson, every scar a story. You don't need to be the best, you just need to keep showing up. Strength isn't about never falling. It's about standing back up again and again until standing becomes natural." The audience erupted in applause, but Leo simply smiled, humbled. When the event ended, he stepped outside, looking up at the same stars that had watched him through every stage of his journey. The night air was cool again, carrying with it a quiet peace. He whispered to himself, "The struggle never ends, it only evolves. And that's the beauty of it." As he walked away into the soft darkness, his steps were steady, his spirit unbreakable. The boy who once doubted himself had become a man who inspired others. And in his heart, he knew that true victory wasn't found on a stage or in a mirror, but in the simple, powerful act of never giving up.